Um, my name is, there we go, continue. My name is Steve. This is Phil. We're going to do about an hour on business development, sales, and those kinds of topics and what that looks like in the world in general, basically, but also technology, which is where I've been working the last 20 years. And so, let's see. The introduction basically is that inside of a modern tech company, there's only two jobs. You're either shipping code or you're selling. And most people who go to business school, aren't going to end up being coders. And so you should learn how to sell. And the quick story behind the genesis of this workshop is 3 years ago, a friend of mine who's also a technology CEO here in Los Angeles, we were on a panel for the Easton conference, the CES conference, maybe like 3 years ago, and we're both Anderson alum, and we knew each other for a long time, and we were sort of bemoaning the fact that we spent most of our days selling in one way or another, and that was something that we hadn't learned in business school. And so I talked to some of the people involved with Easton, and they invited us to pull this together. I think it should be a full 10-week course in selling. I think it's a really valuable thing to learn. And so I'd encourage everybody to, we're only going to really scratch the surface here. I think we'd love to hear as many questions as possible. It's tough in this format though. So I guess maybe put a questions into the chat, and Richard will monitor those. But we'd love to also, hear them in person if you guys have figured out the polite way to do that in a 70-person Zoom. A little bit about us. Phil and I have known each other since the 80s. We went to undergrad together at the University of Notre Dame. I was a mechanical engineering major, and we've kept in touch ever since. Phil's had a great career in and around both being a salesperson, managing sales teams, and now he teaches sales leaders how to lead sales organizations. And so when I started putting this course together, I asked him, so I'll let him give his full bio in a second. I worked as an engineer for the first few years, and as I'm sure many of you share this, sort of went to business school to stop being an engineer and broaden my career. And then, since then, I've basically been working in technology companies, and I spent about I've been 20 years out of business school, and I spent about the first 10 either be an individual contributor in a business development group, or running a business development team, or building business development teams. And then I've been the last 10 years as CEOs of tech companies, and hired salespeople and built out sales functions. And so it's something that I've done a lot of, both in terms of being the guy with the bag, and also running teams, and then also being responsible for companies that have sales teams inside of them. So Phil, do you want to give your bio?
Yeah, I was a double major at Notre Dame in English and economics, which qualifies you to do, I'm not sure exactly what job, but for me that ended up being a sales function. I got involved in heavy industry, industrial manufacturing in the United States, largely in the steel business for the first decade of my career, which was a ball, but turned out to be a terrible business to be in at that time. And pivoted over into medical device, around the age of 30, and I spent my 30s in med device, in the steel business. I was a salesperson, then I was a sales manager and a regional manager, and became a director back at our headquarters, and then kind of ran the same plays at Stryker Orthopedics, where I worked in the medical device world, and realized in going through that, it doesn't really matter what you're selling. The sales function is largely the same. Leading sales teams is largely the same. There's a process to both that leads to sort of better and more predictable and desirable results than I think a lot of people or a lot of organizational leaders will give it credit. Sales comes with sales comes this sort of stigma that, you know, some people have the gift of gab, so to speak. But in today's modern economy, with the velocity of change that we have to navigate for the inside our organizations and the customers and stakeholders that we have to accommodate, the gift of gab only, you know, or your ability to persuade people is not exactly the separating skill, so to speak. That there are a lot of analytics and a lot of process that go into this profession that aren't something typically studied in university. And so we've learned on the fly, and over time we think we've learned it well enough to package it into a program that now we make a living as a small boutique consulting firm that we run here out of San Diego, which is what I've been doing for the last 12 years.
Thanks, Phil. And so, you know, the agenda here is, you know, this we developed this to sort of teach it in person, and we had 2 hours last time, and I understand 2 hours is too long to do, you know, these Zoom type calls, and so we're kind of cramming it down. And so the case study part, I'll just sort of run through. We also had some sort of breakout exercises around sales prep that we'll just run you through. But we want to, you know, basically give a high level overview of what sales and business development, you know, are all about, and then some, you know, tips and tricks. And really, this is about, like, at some point in your career, you might not ever be a salesperson or be a sales manager, but they're either going to work for you, or you're going to be partnering with them, or you're going to need to hire them and manage them. And so if you don't know anything about it, it's just like not knowing anything about economics or finance or accounting. You're not equipped to do your job as well as possible. And I think what we're really going to just try to do in this hour, and then we have a half hour afterwards for Q&A, is to really just sort of talk about how important it is, really, some of the high level problems that you potentially, or challenges that you'll face in your career, and how you should think about them. You know, and then, you know, basically 5 or 10 years from now, when all of a sudden you're accountable, either, you know, as a CEO or as a division manager or something, for hitting a sales number, you'll take it seriously enough to go and get a couple books, or, you know, or otherwise, or hire somebody like Phil, or you know, do the things that you need to do to really treat it as the discipline that it is. So that's the objectives there. You know, and this part, you know, I think is sort of like got to the frustration I was talking about when we were getting ready to do the panel on technology, you know, at Easton, which is, you know, that selling really, you know, sort of, it's looked on, you know, potentially as something that, you know, an MBA student's too smart to do, or too well trained to do, and you know, I don't want to be in sales. And in fact, you know, we've gotten the feedback both times in marketing this course that we have to call it business development, or nobody will sign up. And you know, which is kind of funny, because business development, I have a slide on that later and talking about the difference of those, but they're very similar in how you approach them. But I also wanted to talk about, you know, in terms of my experience, that there are a whole bunch of things that you're going to do as a professional, even if they aren't specifically revenue related, that are sales processes. And we're going to talk a lot about what that is, which basically means you start with, you know, a bunch of prospects, and you bring them all the way down a sales funnel into closing a deal. And anytime you're raising money from venture capital, you're selling your company, and it's a process, and there's, you know, tons and tons of information about how to do that. Getting hired, you'll start with, you know, 25 companies you'd like to work at in order to get down to the one, and you've got to move people through a process. Selling a company, if you're a CEO or a banker and you need to sell a company, you'll run a sales process. And so this isn't about, as Phil said, kind of ringing a doorbell and selling somebody vacuum cleaners. Although Phil and I have both done that in our college and pre-college days. We both rang on doorbells and cold called people for money as a way to kind of get started. So, but thinking about, you're going to recognize in your career a lot of the tasks that you need to do in order to be successful are about selling.
Yeah, and if I could kind of piggyback onto that and maybe speak to this corporate America column, and in saying that it does become a separating skill on a resume to have had and built a good reputation for yourself around customer-facing activities, whether they be sales, business development, marketing, but things that are done to appeal to an audience to generate revenue for an organization. As Steve mentioned, sometimes the sales department carries with it, a certain reputation. What we realized in being involved with lots of different companies and selling lots of different technologies is none of those other jobs are jobs until somebody generates $1. And you, like it or not, you need salespeople, and you need good salespeople. You need good sales leadership to generate a revenue stream. I mean, anybody who's responsible for a bottom line, that's responsible for earnings, it's a real simple world in business. Revenue minus COGS gives you your earnings. And if you're not hitting your revenue number, it's not fun. It's not a lot of fun managing your business when you got to keep cutting COGS. Everybody's happy when the revenue number's high. It's one of those. If the earnings number's the have to hit number, the revenue number's the sure nice to have hit it along the way kind of number. And to Steve's point, we realize that it's not a formal part of the curriculum, and that a lot of us has learned it by way of School of Hard Knocks. We want to give you some things here today that hopefully you can take and put into play right away in marketing yourselves, and maybe take with you some things to think about, maybe do some additional research on if it's not something that you recognize comes as naturally to you as it might another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the last thing in terms of like getting hired too, right? I mean, if you're going to be a product manager in a tech company, you're going to have to partner with sales, and in the interview process, you might get asked about that, and not knowing the first thing about what a salesperson does is gonna hurt you there. And then when you actually get the job as the product manager or the finance manager or the marketing manager, you will have to work with salespeople, and knowing kind of what they do is really important to your success.
Yeah, one saying that I use all the time in working with companies, as we sit and you sit in the boardroom and try to make decisions, and sometimes you got to level set the group and say, whoever we are or however big our company is, we don't make the rules. The market makes the rules. And your salespeople are the ones who are interfacing with the street, with the market, with the customers every day. And so not only to have an understanding of what it is they do, but an appreciation for the information that they bring back to the organization from the street can be particularly valuable to you as a leader.
Yeah, and I think this slide here, I was just we were about a year ago, we were pulling together this curriculum for last year. Leo's a friend of mine. He's a venture capitalist, and it just, this is basically sales funnel math, and he's talking about, how your, the quality of your pitch and what your chances are of funding, and what we're talking about here is the things, you have to think about making as many, getting as many swings at the bat, and then improving your batting average too. And there's just things that you need to do. And this doesn't have anything to do with being a salesperson. This is about raising money from VC, with probably some of the people here in this audience would like to do someday, or maybe be part of that, that process. And you do the exact same stuff raising venture capital as you do in trying to sell medical devices, et cetera. It's very, very similar. So I thought I'd talk about this, and really the thing that I'm just trying to get across, to be very direct here, is that there's a stigma against sales, and did the exact same thing. I got a business development job out of Anderson, and I might have been better served by actually looking for a sales job. And in this tough job market, what I would like to say to everybody here is like, look for sales jobs. There's actually way more of them than there are business development jobs, and you're kind of doing the same work. And just in terms of like what the difference is, the main difference, what I used to say when I was doing business development is that it's sales, except for that you're kind of making up what you're selling as you're going along. It's a little bit more fluid, whereas a salesperson typically has something well defined, and there might be some discounting and stuff, but the pricing is set. You're usually competing against known competitors, etc. So there is a little bit of difference there, but there's also difference in terms of comp. You can, if you're a good salesperson, you're getting the same skills as you are in business development, but you can make a lot more money because you're closer to the revenue. And as you'll see, if you're ever trying to hire salespeople, good salespeople are rare, and they're hard to find, and they're well comped. You also, in terms of sales management, you can just manage a bigger team. I mean, business development groups, even inside of big companies, big tech companies, tend to be small. Maybe Facebook might have 30 or 40 business development people across the entire company. I mean, when I worked at Yahoo, when it was really big in like 2005, there might have been 20 business development people in that company, but hundreds of salespeople. So you get a lot of those skills around managing people. You also, it's very clearly measured. Typically, with business development, it's hard to know whether you failed because you didn't have the right product, or you didn't have enough money, or all of these things. And sales of success and failures is a little bit typical, and I think that it's a little bit more easily measured, and I think that's off-putting to some people. But let me tell you, I mean, you guys have invested a lot in yourselves and in your career, and you want to be held accountable, and you want to be rewarded when you succeed. And so sales is an interesting way to do that. And the last thing, which is like, I won't have time to tell the story of my career, but business development, there's no chief business development officer usually in a company. You sort of top out at your level, and you have to do some kind of lateral move in order to keep rising inside of a company. Whereas there's always a chief revenue officer in a big company, and they're almost always coming out of the sales role. So that's the end of the soapbox here. But I do feel that that business school students, I think most of us, like I said, the CEOs that I know, we have the highest respect for sales. We spend a lot of our time thinking about it. We spend a lot of our time recruiting and managing the sales function, and it should be taken, very, very seriously inside of your career. Okay. Yeah, and this, I guess, sort of echoes that point. In terms of it, like, I've run business development teams with double-digit people on them. I've had sales teams reporting into me that have a lot of people on them. And whether you're doing one or the other as a leader and as a manager, a lot of what you're doing is similar. You're really you're going to do, and Phil's going to lead, some more detailed discussions on how you do these things. But you're starting out with who should we target. You're setting up your target list. You're trying to get your way into them. You're trying to map those organizations. Qualification, which is something that we'll talk about, is really important. You want to make sure that you're not spending a lot of time on people who are never going to buy or never going to be partners, etc. And then you're negotiating, and you're closing deals, and then you're handing the deals off to somebody else in the team. And then, most importantly, reporting progress, right? I mean, the thing, the closer you are to the revenue side of the business, the more scrutiny that you're under. And with business development, where you don't have a hard and fast sales number necessarily all the time, you have to look to things like sales pipelines or business development pipelines as a way to convince people that you're doing your job and that you're having success, or that you're running into problems, or whatever it is that you need to communicate. So a lot of the um, a lot of the lessons learned from managing sales are things that, if you find yourself doing business development, are going to be things that you want to learn and practice. And so, yeah, like I said in the thing about selling your company or raising VC, the faster you realize when you're in a sales process, the better you're going to be at kind of getting through it without pulling out your hair and getting some success at the end. And so the tenets of sales, and we're not going to get to all of them. You can read books, you can find websites, or there are professionals like Phil you can bring in and coach you and learn on. If you do want to do business development inside of a company, you're going to see that the most success, there are a lot of hand wavy business development people out there. You want to be the one that's managing it really professionally, that's turning, that's doing things in a smart way, that's constantly revisiting process and revisiting success metrics, and asking yourself, could I do it better? Could we close more? Trying to learn from the data. All of these things that good salespeople do, you want to do in business development. There are way too many people out there in business development roles who think that they should just get paid by the meeting in big companies, and you don't want to be that business development person. Anything to add, Phil, to any of the things I'm talking about?
No, I'd say let's keep moving. That's
Okay.
That's all well said. And maybe we'll speak a little bit here as we move in on obviously the sales function. And Steve, you've got control of the of the deck. So here, what we want to do, we mentioned one of the goals would be to have you leave with some things you could take with you right away. A lot of you are trying to, whether you're trying to lock down an internship in this difficult market or looking for full-time employment, maybe this is something you could put to use in your in the selling of yourself kind of process. But we've heard the word process a lot of different times, and whether you're talking about a management process, a manufacturing process, or a sales process, what's true about processes is skip steps, get stuck. Skip steps, make a bad part. There's a defined, people have been selling things for centuries. And over time, we started studying what that looks like and figuring out what works. And a lot of research has gone into sort of the human side of business. And sales is one of those functions where there's some art to it. There's also some science to it. There's certainly some business acumen that plays a part. There's also a huge psychology role that plays a part in any time you're trying to get work done through other people. There's a psychology role in it. And anybody who's led a team of people has had a commute home going, I should have studied psychology. Like this is a psychology job. This isn't an economics job. I'm trying to manage heads, not spreadsheets. And nowhere is that more true in the human side of the business of face-to-face selling. It's not a well-studied topic in academia, yet it's a process that needs to be coached. It has a lot to do with habit, both our own and our customers. Our customers behave the way they do for a reason. They made a decision thinking it was the best decision to be made, and it's your job as a seller to give them new information so they can make a new and different decision that involves you. You can't get your work done in a vacuum. You got to get your work done through other people. That's true as a salesperson. That's true as a sales leader, and that's true as a company leader. You're not doing the work yourself. You're getting the work done through other people. And a psychology, it's a psychologist's job to change, alter, or reinforce the behavior of another person. And that is a leader's job, and that is a salesperson's job. On the sales management side, one of the things I was taught that stuck with me my whole career is that good sales management costs exactly the same as bad sales management, and yet it can be one of the fundamental differentiators you have in the market in the marketplace. And it's the least expensive, most cost-effective way to impact a company's financial health. And so here today, Steve, if you'd advance the slide, we want to talk a little bit about the sales process, maybe talk a little bit about the sales management process, which doesn't differ a whole lot from managing other departments. If you're managing people, management process matters. And I think, and maybe in the here and now, it can matter as much as an interview as it will in the job, to be able to speak to, how would you go about managing a situation like this? And to be able to speak specifically to a process shows that this is something that you've thought about, that you have some thoughts on. And when we go to market as a management consulting firm, on the sales side, we use this acronym BRIDGE. So you see at the top business planning, and then down here in red are topics we're not going to get into so much in this conversation, but don't want to discount their value. It's just we only have 60 minutes. But to cover the things quickly, we're not going to cover today in depth, but relationship building. Most sales are what I call wear well sales. In other words, there's some sales, there's room for the flashy suit where you come in, you make a whiz-bang presentation, you sell something, you get on down the road. In most businesses, recurring revenue is the stream or the annuity that you're looking for. And you need to build relationships. And we talked in the mentoring session earlier a lot about brand building and the reputation you build for yourself in a market. And so relationships, and there's a whole science behind how to develop trusting relationships with others. And it's been our philosophy, and it's something that's proven true largely over time, is that people buy from people they trust. And so the exercise becomes, what are the activities we can perform on an ongoing basis that generate trust in a relationship, person to person, and as a follow-on, company to company. Investigating needs. We need to be able to attach whatever it is we're selling to a problem, challenge, or opportunity that somebody has. And as much as we're going to try to get into that in the business planning to be able to anticipate what those things are, let's face it, the only data people don't argue with is their own data. And once they say something, they can't unsay something. And so part of the art in selling is to get people to divulge things to you that they might not another person. So that somewhere in this sales process, you can say, so if I'm hearing you right, the two things you really need to be able to accomplish in your role are X and Y. Would you mind if we spent a couple of minutes talking about how our technology might help you do those things? And you have such a better chance of selling something if you're selling using their words versus your own words. It's because you have to solve these two problems that we need to be talking together. If you can get to that point in the sale, you're in a great spot. And that's all about investigating needs, which is preparing probing sequences, asking well thought out questions on the front end. And Steve, sounds like you have an injection there.
Yeah, well, I mean, whenever I'm mentoring young people who are, or who are coming in to, to a selling situation, the main thing that I say, is remember, like, this is going to be successful if at least 75% of the time they're doing the talking. Most people equate selling, as Phil said, with with you're just talking and you're selling and you're trying to convince people to do something. Really successful salespeople listen most of the time, and they ask questions that get to that get them. It's almost like playing poker, right? Where you're just trying to get people to tell you what it is that they need.
Yep, no question about it. And I would ask you just to put your own buying shoes on as you're thinking about what it is you're selling. We all buy things from time to time. Sometimes, they're major ticket items. And think about the salespeople that you deal with and who did a good job of building trust in the relationship and understanding where you're coming from before they ever started talking about what it is they're selling. Far too many salespeople think that memorizing the 10 points on the marketing glossy and being able to recite them off the tip of your tongue is what gets it done. It's absolutely not. In fact, after we investigate needs, what I speak to in delivering solutions is stay on point. If the customer asks you to solve X and Y, what are you doing talking about Z? I understand your product can do that. Did the customer express any interest in that topic? They don't need to know how that watch was made. They need to care. They seem to care about this thing. Talk about the things they care about. And then let's face it, it is real world. No matter how good you are on the front end, customers have objections. There are reasons, some of them very valid, as to why they might not be interested or in a position to buy now. When it comes to getting past objections, whether it's selling yourself in the interview process now, or what objection you anticipate in today's market. Well, we're currently on a hiring freeze, or you're going to run into obstacles. Of course you are. What are you going to do when you encounter those obstacles? And I think we all have a fight or flight response to stress, and it's a stressful thing to do, to be making sales calls or interviewing for a job. And the only tool we have to overcome that fight or flight response we have to stress is preparation. You have to have thought about it ahead of time, so that when it comes up in real time, you don't go deer in the headlights. You've got a prepared way to handle that, an intelligent response that gives you the best possible chance. And then expecting obstacles is just a tactic to improve your close rates. And it's almost like the new or more immature salesperson is, as soon as they hear yes, they want to jump up and say, well, I won't let you down. Where the more experienced reps realize that yes I can't cash a yes. I can cash a commission check, which means something has to get delivered and paid for. And there are obstacles that stand between your initial yes and a firm commitment. So when someone says, yes, I'm interested in moving forward, that the more mature rep was almost expecting that yes, and says, fantastic. Before we move forward, let me ask you a couple of questions so we're sure to hit the mark on your end, and understand your customer's expectations. Understand there's not another decision maker that's going to get involved late stage. So those are things I wanted to just hit on quickly because those are very skill related. Those are things that have to be practiced and repeated in order to embed as habit. And that some of that comes with experience. Some of that comes with your own training. I would encourage you to read and practice on any of those topics. What's not necessarily a skill, but is a discipline that the best sellers engage in spades, is the business planning process. And I think when I'm teaching sales teams, I spend about 50-50 time-wise. Spend about 50% of the time talking sales strategy and about 50% of the time talking sales tactics. And it's like, there's so many reasons we can lose in a complex marketplace. Let's not lose on a simple discipline by making a stupid strategic mistake on the front end. So we start with, a simple CRM, just customer recon. What is it about the customers in a potential market that we're pursuing that we would need to know in order to prepare a reasonable business plan? And in the sales teams, we recommend quarterly business plans. Annual is just not frequent enough in today's dynamic environment. And so from that quarterly plan, we're looking for specific targets. Where a business plan is, in a nutshell, it's just, where are you now? Where do you need to be at the end of the period? And how are you going to get there? And so once a quarter, we would ask a sales team to look at that. Where are you now in terms of revenue generation? Where do you need to be at the end of the quarter? What's the plan? How you going to get there? And invariably, that's going to be through certain primary targets. We want to apply as much science and analytics to the targeting process on the front end as possible, so that when we go driving 100 miles an hour, we're sure to be driving in as right a direction as possible. And that includes, that helps us forecast more accurately and build what we'll call sales action plans, even weekly plans, and some of the more minutia as we get into sales management. And Steve, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat I just wanted to make you aware of from Minyi, which is, can you comment on over/underselling and managing customers' expectations? And I mean, I think that we are going to sort of deal with that. A lot of that is really, what we're talking about in terms of like pre-call planning is really the thing with underselling and overselling, and it is, typically happens when you don't come into a conversation with a clear set of objectives, right? And there's a classic mistake which is called selling past the yes. you're talking for 5 minutes. Customer says, yes, okay, you can have the meeting that you're asking for. And then you talk for 10 more minutes. The only thing you can do is undo the yes, right? And so being that this is a preparation question.
Yeah.
But
And
maybe
I
you
would
can
expect,
keep that. Yeah.
yeah, I would
Go ahead,
expect,
Phil.
Steve, that what prompted that question, if you wouldn't mind, go back one, Steve, please.
Okay.
And that's in the expecting obstacles, which is an after yes tactic, where just because you got a yes doesn't mean zip your bag and get out of there as fast as possible before they change their mind. It's more about setting yourself up for success for whatever the next event is in the sales process. So they said yes to a next meeting, or they said yes to some initial purchase. So I'm sure to be successful in that next step, I want to ask some questions about their expectations. One, I hope you can see how, whatever it is we're selling, another meeting, we're asking them for an hour. They just said yes. I hope you can see how after the yes, they can get themselves talked out of like, why did I say yes to that? I got to find a way to either cancel or shorten that meeting. Where if we can say, now, an hour is not a lot of time, and there are a lot of different directions we could go in that conversation. So I can prepare appropriately. Tell me what you would consider to be a good outcome from that next meeting, where they're saying, look, I really want to hear about this. So when I prepare my presentation, I'm not talking about things that aren't germane to the challenges this person's trying to satisfy. It's not to keep talking after you get a yes. It's to make sure you're setting yourself up for success for the next event. All right. So moving forward.
Yeah. Keep the questions coming, guys. Phil, we have we're probably 25 minutes left. So just a time check.
Just, relative to other value adding possibilities, you get a ton of bang for your buck out of a robust business planning process. And, like anybody managing or coaching a football team or anything else, let's not lose on simple disciplines. And here, what we want to do, we want to plan the work as intelligently as we can. And then we go about executing the work plan. And, here's one. It's just a pitch for preparation. If you've got an important presentation, an important interview, if you were a pro athlete, what percentage of your time would you spend preparing versus actually performing? It'd be 98% versus 2%. And yet in the real world, what we tend to see is the opposite. And a lot of people flying by the seat of their pants without enough preparation. And, not to say we live in a cave or naive enough to say you need to spend 50% of your time at home just thinking about your job. There's obviously a huge do component of your job. No matter what job you have, there's a combination of real thinking and real doing. And we tend to see in the real world, especially in sales teams, a preponderance of doing and not enough thinking. And so let's make sure we set aside time for robust business planning. And this is just a simple tool. We talked about the importance of targeting to make sure we're allocating resources and energy in the right direction. And it's just a simple stratification exercise where we ask people to give potential customers or whatever the target would be a volume rating. Is this somebody that can buy 10 or somebody that can buy 1? Is this somebody that can invest 100 or somebody that can invest 10? So, we looking for a whale? Are we talking about a whale or are we talking about a smaller company? And then and that's typically pretty objective. What's subjective is this likelihood y-axis, where what is our likelihood of a win with this customer or target? And depending on what it is you're selling, we've got to put some different things into that criteria. Are they under contract with somebody else? Who's the incumbent? What's that relationship look like? But try to be honest with yourself about what the likelihood is. And that'll help us prepare a right sales strategy. If it is a whale, so they're a 10 in volume, but they're only a 1 in likelihood, that's a long-term target. That's not somebody you're going to close overnight. So let's make our objective something a little bit different this quarter. Our objective this quarter isn't to sell anything, but it's just to get from a 1 to a 3 on our likelihood scale by executing certain activities, where if somebody's already above the equator here or a 6 or greater in likelihood, we can start forecasting that as revenue and put a strategy into place to lock it down.
Yeah, and I would add here, the the thing, if you're not in the sale, this is stuff that you have to do and know really how to do if you're selling. If you're managing selling, or worried about whether a sales team that's underneath you is effective, um, you can ask them to see this type of analysis. Like, how did you pick who you're calling? These kinds of questions can get you to a comfort level, because if you all of a sudden you have a sales team that's underperforming, and then you go in and you realize they didn't do any planning, they're just calling people, like, you've got a problem and you've got to make a change. And if we get time to go into the case at the end with the pipeline, it's sort of what that would look like.
Yep. Now, other things, talking about a lot of reasons to lose. We're not doing our job if we're trying to help a sales team be more effective, and we're turning a blind eye to simple statistics that have proven true over time. And something as simple as goal setting, where, we all have goals, but to have a written goal, it turns out in studies, has proven to have you've got a 33% better chance of a positive outcome. If you share that written goal with someone to whom you're accountable, like a manager, and then the manager on up the chain, that as much as doubles. So just having written goals that are shared and held accountable to, you have a 66% better chance of a positive outcome. Guess what we're doing at my company, right? Let's not overthink it. So just having simple sales goals with plans attached. The next slide, where you were, Steve, and a sales plan can be something as simple as this. And so coming out of that targeting exercise, we've zeroed in on these three companies as our primary targets. So here's a company, that's the target. The goal with this company is whatever the appropriate goal is. Now we talk about, and I saw a question in the ask, what are some of the things we can do to improve the likelihood of a win? It's these necessary actions. And in our company, we call them business drivers. And what are the activities in the job function that have proven to drive revenue or advance sales in the past? And whether it's taking a customer out to dinner, or making 20 cold calls a day, or it depends on the sale, but what are the business drivers? And it's been our experience in working with over 100 companies over the last decade that you can typically count them on one hand, regardless of the job function, that there are, in order to do whatever job well, there are 4 or 5 things these people need to be out doing. What are they, and are we doing enough of them? And then in our training and development initiatives, be addressing, are we doing them at the highest possible level? Especially if you're in a more commodity-driven sale, where, those business drivers, it's the same 5 activities, whether you work for that company or whether you work for that company. So you're selling like products, executing like activities. What's our opportunity to differentiate? We better be executing those activities at a higher level than somebody else. And this is one that has stuck with me forever, and it's what I use as my own discipline to make sure I'm prepared for my own sales calls. And it's this 65% better chance of a positive outcome if given the opportunity to plan the conversation and plan and rehearse the conversation ahead of time. To Steve's point, if you're going to make an important pitch, this better not be your first go at it. This ought to be the 100th. After 100 times of practicing it, you're going to deliver this pitch.
Yeah, I had, when I was a CEO for the first time, I didn't really have very much success with like PR, which is a very much it's a sales process. You're pitching for coverage. And then I worked with somebody who was really good at PR, had a lot of experience, and absolutely the main thing that she did was hold me accountable to practice. Here are the reporters' questions. Here's what they're going to be. You have to anticipate these things and practice them. And I mean, I hate doing it. I try to cancel it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to practice. I got a million other things I want to do as a CEO. You got to practice. You've got to plan and rehearse, and getting into, especially with sales, and especially if you're selling as a group, like you guys know, you do a lot of group work at UCLA, right? Preparation, a lot of it is just making sure everybody agrees what we're trying to get out of the meeting, what we're trying to say, understands, where the landmines could be, etc. So this one, we all think we're really smart, and we all think we can kind of just talk off the top of our head. The higher the leverage, the more planning and rehearsing you'll do, and you'll see really great leaders of all kinds, not just salespeople. Really spending a lot of time on this.
Well, Steve, the analogy I give here, and not that we're trying to liken what it is we're trying to sell to what it is they're trying to prepare people to do in the military, but to what degree do they train in the military all day, every day?
Yeah.
Why?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's critical in that job that they execute under stress. And so, if you've ever heard a soldier or a first responder of some kind interviewed, it's like, wow, what allowed you to do that? Or what made you think to do that in that situation? What do they say every time? I don't know. I didn't think, my training kind of took over. And the same thing is true. These are high stress environments we get put into, and what allowed you to execute in that high stress environment? It wasn't me being quick on my feet. It's that I was prepared.
I see a couple more questions in here. Since we only have 10 minutes left to go through a few more of these things that we want to cover, why don't we push sort of answering the questions out to after that, in case some people have to go, because we just want to sort of fly through a few more things.
Okay. And then lastly, Steve, I'll just speak to this quickly. We talked about the importance of preparation, and what does good call preparation or good meeting preparation look like? Who are you calling on? What's the objective? How are you going to, this opening probe is, how are you going to initiate the dialogue? How are you going to expand on topics? There's 1,000 books, 1,000 resources out there that people can use in terms of pre-call plan templates. They're all good. Pick one. Just make sure you put something in play that allows you to decide what it is you're trying to accomplish, how it is you're going to accomplish it, and especially address what can be high stress points in a meeting, which for most of us, getting the meeting started is a huge part of it. When are you most nervous? Like, once I get into the thing, I actually get some adrenaline going. I do pretty well, but getting it started, and if anybody's ever read the book Blink, it's a Gladwell book, but why does he call it Blink? It's like people make a decision about you and the direction of this conversation in a very short period of time. And so at this time when you're most nervous and likely to be hemming and hawing and stammering is when they're making the determination about you, your product, and your character. Not a good combo. We have to be prepared on the front end. Also, objections. If you're going to get pushback, where are you expecting pushback? How are you going to deal with that when it comes up? So some sort of pre-call or pre-meeting plan is always recommended.
Yeah. And again, like half of the things on here are questions, right? So you're trying to get them to talk. You don't want the entire call to be, you talking. Another thing that jumps out at me as I, sort of see this, last time we actually did a breakout around this and we had people practice doing this. And, but another thing that, that occurs to me is when you're talking about an organization, right? Like, yeah, the guy who's been selling the same thing for 10 years, or the person who's got an IQ of 200 and, and can do a lot of stuff, but like the culture of preparation and the culture of novice people seeing the most experienced people prepare and be prepared is really important. And so being accountable as a leader to doing this kind of work, no matter how, much it seems like you might need to do it is really important, and it will bleed down. And so it's just a really non-obvious thing that most people don't do, that the best people always do.
Great point.
Yeah, and this, we won't have time to kind of go through this, but we basically gave people, just an exercise like this. And I think, anytime you're going to have a call, getting a job, anytime you want somebody to do something, taking 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, depending on how much time you have and how much leverage you have to, kind of say, what do I actually want to have accomplished? Where are they going to be coming from? And doing that, you're just going to see a great increase in your hit rate there. Okay.
I don't know if, let's skip this one,
Yeah.
Steve.
Okay.
Too much here to get into in the limited amount of time we have.
Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, and so we're going to spend the last here six or 10 minutes just going through a pipeline case study, and just to refresh everybody's memory, like pipeline, basically all that means is that it's your list of everything you are working on in sales. So it's all the way from the people who you like to target down to the people you're negotiating with and closing with, and it's a way to it's basically the main communication tool that you have up and down, about how with the health of your sales organization, and it's also your main management tool as you're working through, could we be doing better, are all my people do up at the right standard, etc. And so in this particular case, what we're basically saying is like, you've been working really hard, you get a promotion, all of a sudden now you have a P&L, you're responsible for a revenue number, and you got a sales target of $1 million, for the next year. It could be $100 million, doesn't matter, for this particular case. This should probably say 2021 or something like that. But and so not only though have you been promoted, but you have a new sales lead. You're the established salesperson has gone on, and now you've got a new guy who's been recently hired, and he's the replacement. And so this is a picture we found on the internet of sort of what you'll see lots of different pipelines. They're usually customized to the industry or the process that you have, but it's called a funnel, a sales funnel, and it starts wide with a lot of prospects and it closes down, and you kind of lose people throughout each step. And so I'm going to jump out into this sheet here, and then I got to move. Sorry, got to move. Just close. Sorry, can't see the. Hold on. I can't see the. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is what a sales pipeline would look like, right? You've got all your target names along the left. They're broken into stages. So in this particular case, there's prospects, qualification, which we didn't talk about, but the difference between a prospect and somebody's qualified is it's like that they have the budget, and that they're in the market and they're looking to make a decision. So all you're doing is weeding out people who are never going to be, you don't want to be spending any time on, because they're never going to be buyers. And you'll typically have a set of questions or a set of criteria that you're trying to move people from prospects to qualified. A lot of times prospects will be leads coming in from the website, or business cards that happened at a sales conference, or the junior analyst went through and did a Google search and figured 50 companies that might meet your criteria or whatever. They're just a list of names, and you're trying to move them down. And so then you go here into like, we're making a presentation, we're making a proposal, we're in negotiation, and then finally we won or we lost. And so I mean, every sales organization that I've ever been in or managed, and then any sales process like raising venture capital, et cetera, you have something like this that you put together. And basically Salesforce.com is a multi-billion-dollar company that all it does is like help people manage this, for lack of a better word. And so in this particular case, I can't go all the way through it in detail, but I'm just going to sort of point out like what a seasoned manager would do. And a lot of the times, if you're not the sales manager, what you're trying to do is understand, am I getting the real data out of my sales organization, right? Because they might be comped short term, or they might be trying to obfuscate problems, make everything look good, because for whatever reason they might not have alignment with you. And you need to be able to sort of recognize, hey, things are healthy or on track. Because what happens with sales, a lot of times the lead cycles are long, and sometimes by the time you realize that you have a problem with sales, it's too late to really react and save your year or save your quarter. And so for the most part, like best practice oftentimes is that you're reviewing this every week with every line, and you're going through and you're sort of talking about what's happening, and you're trying to understand it. So in this particular case, what we were looking at is basically, if you look, there are two ways that prospects are coming in. You're either getting them as emails or cold calls. It doesn't matter for the sake of this. It's just like you're getting leads, and then you can see which of those are moving down into qualified, and which of them are and how they're moving through the pipeline. This number here is a really important number that you'll see. It's called your weighted pipeline. Your pipeline is just, you add up your estimated value of all the potential sales you have. The weight would be multiplying it by what stage they're at, so you get an idea of like probability of close times what we'll get if we close. You add them all up. So in this particular case, I'm at the beginning of Q1. I've got an annual target of a million. My weighted pipeline is $500,000. I'm feeling pretty good about that. That's I've got a whole year to find. If I close all of these along all of these according to these probabilities and they're accurate, I basically got to do that twice this year to hit my number. So I'm feeling like I'm in good shape. But I can see, a few things that if I was an experienced person that I would see, which is when I go to my qualified level, only 2 of my qualified leads are coming out of that email channel, and most of them are coming out of cold calls. So we would talk about the quality of the email leads not being good. The other thing that I can look at is I can see that the email leads tend to be smaller in average value than the cold call leads. And so, that would say to me, hey, we should be focusing on cold calls. And so to kind of cut to the chase, because, we're running out of time, what happens with Jimmy Techbro, your bad sales manager, is he starts jamming your pipeline full of email leads, right? He's only got 3. And when Phil was talking about like activities for success, like think about you're managing a 10-person sales team, and the leads can either come in for free off the website, or you have to pick up the phone and do something that's unpleasant or that's difficult or that's challenging. If you're not managing that team, they're just going to probably lean towards the easy way and talk themselves into hey, the email ones are the way to go. I don't have to make any cold calls. I would get a lot of them, etc. And so, a couple things that I would notice here would be, I still have a weighted pipeline of a $500,000. I actually won 200,000 last quarter. So, I'm a quarter of the way through. I'm a little less than a quarter of the way to my goal. I'm feeling, okay about that. But I actually closed everything that was in the negotiation stage. So I sort of outperformed where I was in that pipeline. So, there's a little bit of nervousness. What if I don't have such a high close rate? And then, I'm looking at some other numbers in terms of like conversion from lead to qualified is 37% for emails. It's 66% for cold calls. So not only are they bigger dollar amounts, but they convert better. So I would start to get nervous about the fact that, that my prospects for next quarter are mostly emails, right? And then the punchline of the analysis is that I come in here and I look at I only won 148,000. I still hit 75% closure, but the one that I lost was the big one. It was the $100,000 one. And so while, that stage looked pretty good, God, I wish that I had gone on that meeting with the sales guy to the big high leverage presentation. God, I wish we had prepared more, because losing that one has got me behind the 8 ball. And then not only that, but my pipeline's looking weak all the way through, right? I don't have, I only have 3 cold called in qualified from last quarter, which I know are the ones that, that are the higher value one. I'm in big trouble. And like I said before, now I'm halfway through the year. Turns out my sales manager's been fooling me. Turns out we haven't been working on the leads. So even if I close everything that's in my pipeline now, I'm still behind on the year. And so the entire point of this exercise was just to give everybody, you guys learn a lot of techniques like this in business school and finance and all these ratios and all of these, FIFO, LIFO and accounting and all of this stuff. The exact same thing, goes to managing revenue and goes to managing, salespeople. And like Phil said, you have to mix in here. There's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of incentivizing. There's a lot of pressure. So, so if you do ever find yourself in a situation where you've got a new sales manager, ask them, hey, what is the quality of your leads? How are you getting these leads? What can we do to improve our close rate and negotiation? These kinds of questions, while they might seem, like you're kind of stepping on his toes, a good sales manager is going to expect to be managed that way. And then again, if you're like me and you're managing a business development team, you have to make sure that the people on your team are doing the types of activities that are going to lead to a successful pipeline through there. And so it does kind of come to, I had one job where it was just like, you have to log how many, business dinners you went on. You have to log how many, calls you made to prospects. You have to make sure that you were doing, business reviews with your recurring customers every quarter, things that, that you just have to make sure that you do.
Yeah, we call it manage inputs versus outputs, and too much sales management is about managing the number, where you're going to hit your number or not hit your number once a year. But what Steve's talking about is what leads you to hitting the number is all these activities that take place over the course of the year. It's what you did 6 months ago that's allowing you to close a deal today. And so as in managing the sales function, manage the activities that ultimately lead to revenue as opposed to the actual, as opposed to managing the revenue.
Yeah, we've all had this situation where, like, sales are great and your entire sales team, you're closing a bunch of deals and everybody's so busy and you have a great quarter. And then you get into the beginning of the next quarter and you're like, oh, shoot, we don't have anybody in the pipeline. We're starting from zero here, because we didn't make sure that a couple people were doing the things that we need to do. So that being said, that's the end of like the presentation, part of the of things. I will stop this share here, and jump in. Looks like we got some questions here. I guess we can.
Yeah, we've got 8 or 10 that I've been sort of monitoring along the way. You want to just kind of take them from the top? I think we hit the first one, the over/under selling in managing customer expectations. So, how can you make the likelihood metric more data driven? To some degree, hopefully Steve spoke to that a little bit in the case study there, where you do assign some analytics to it, where historically, what's our percentage of conversion as we move from one stage to another. That said, like psychology, sales is something of a human science, where in psychology there are very few facts. There's a lot of prevailing theory, and it's important that you have a sales leader that you trust, and maybe more importantly, has a trusted following whose gut you're going to have to lean on over and over, because they've been doing this for a long time. It's an important job in a company, and you need to be able to sort of trust their projections. And some of it just things that are going to prove true over time.
Yeah, and I would say the one thing that I just see people, make the mistake of over and over, and it happens less in tech companies now because we're also data driven, but, make sure you collect the data, right? I mean, if you come out of a bad sales quarter and you're just like, I don't understand why we did bad. And it's like, well, the guy raises his hand, all the companies that are on the East Coast said no, all the companies on the West Coast said yes, because I did this analysis. It's like, that there's just the first part of data-driven sales is collecting the data and then making sure you have the right team and the right analytics tools to be able to analyze it.
Yeah, sure. Almost like an analyst call, you've got to make projections, and analysts have to decide whether to recommend a buy for you. And so it's, okay, this is what you did this quarter. What can you tell me that's going to give me confidence that you're going to have equal or more success next quarter? And you need to be able to speak to activities and pipeline activities to be able to accurately offer reliable projections.
Yep. Okay. Speaking of the metrics, any specific metrics in sales that work well for particular types of business? I mean, there are just so many, and the funny thing, for tech right now is that it's so blurred, right? I mean, there isn't driven tech company, especially one that has a sales force. I mean, a lot of them are maybe there isn't a direct selling force, and you're selling everything with Facebook ads, etc. Um, but you're talking about metrics and measuring things and trying to find insights and data all day long throughout your entire company for the most part. And so um, it's a really great question. There's a ton written on it. It's hard to kind of go into things, specifics, because I think it depends. But you learned a lot of the stuff in marketing. Marketing leads to sales. Segmenting your customers. Making sure you understand which kinds of sales pitches work for which categories of customers. Making sure you're spending the right amount of money on marketing to get your leads in. It's all about metrics there.
Yeah, and again, having worked with over 100 companies in this consulting role, it depends on the sale. Typically not that hard to get to the bottom of it if they're not already defined. These business driver activities I'm talking about, make sure to have them defined in short order. And in most sales, I talked about, in my background in medical device, it's very specific. I don't care if you're selling an artificial hip, an artificial knee, a heart valve, or some peripheral or vascular catheter. In medical device, you make sales calls, you add value clinically, you do relationship building events like take customers out to dinner, you do training events to teach them new procedures in surgery, and you can take them to your headquarters to get them involved in R&D and product design. There are 6 business drivers. Like, if we do enough of these things and we do them well, we will be successful. If we don't do enough of them, or we don't do them well, we're probably not going to hit our number. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I mean about when Steve was saying, or when I'm saying manage the inputs, not the outputs. I wholly agree with activity tracking with sales teams. It's okay. What are we doing this week? What did we do last week? That gives me some confidence that we're moving deals forward. I want to hear from every sales rep that last week I conducted these events. This week I have these meetings planned. I have that training event that I'm going to attend in New Orleans, and then I'm going to go do this. Okay, that gives me confidence that this person is out doing the right things. And I'm continuing to invest in the training and development side of my business, so that I have a differentiator in my people, knowing that my competitors are trying to execute those same activities. It's just, I know that my people are better. And so that activity is more meaningful to the customer having done it with my guy versus somebody else's.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what psychological persuasion techniques do salespeople use? I think it's actually, as Phil was saying, it's a lot. The psychology is less about sort of persuasion than it is in and just making sure that you're clearly communicating with each other about like what the problem is, what the needs are, and whether you can meet it or not. I mean, one thing here that jumps to mind, which isn't revenue driven, as a CEO of a company, your involvement in the hiring process, usually by the time somebody gets to you, they can do the job, right? They've been compared against a lot of other people, and so it's your job to get them to actually accept the job offer, right? And I usually am doing 2 things. It's like, is this person going to be a cultural fit? Are they going to get along with my team? Are they going to be a problem? And then what do I have to do to get them to say yes? And the whole thing about that is not, if it's all going to be about like, what's the salary, what are the benefits, what are the hours, what's my title, I'm in the wrong part of their brain, right? It's just like, I want to be in the part of their brain where they're excited to come in and, and climb a mountain, charge a mountain, have the best experience of their career, change the world. Like, that's where I'm, trying to go. And so it's not a persuasion technique. It's just about sort of like having them leave that meeting and say, you know what, like, that guy looks like he's having fun at work. I would want to work for a guy like that. And by the way, that company, like, he told me 5 exciting things, about them. And, it's like, I don't care whether I'm getting paid 185 or 205, or I got this many options or that many options, I'm going. And that, I've done that 100 times and so, all I can say about the psychological place is just figure out where you want emotionally. If it is going to be an emotional component to the sale, figure out where you want that person to be spending their decision time.
Yeah, that's the word, Steve, really is. And where, the analytical mind sometimes has a hard time grappling with this simple human truth. And it's that emotion, not logic, drives behavior. And nowhere is that more true than in sales. And there are a lot of different sales models out there, but they all try to accomplish the same thing, and that's to attach an emotion to a buying motivator. And so the simplest model is, I think about it, just think about it's a simple Rubik almost, where up here we've got logical questions, which basically, you need to be able to understand where they are as a company now and where they want to go as a company. Okay, so I've got a gap. They're not where they want to go, so there is a need. Now I need to be able to attach that need, so I come below the line and ask emotional questions. What are the risks and consequences of not doing something different? What are the benefits and rewards of achieving what it is you need to? So there's sort of 2 base human motivators. It's fear of loss and hope of gain. So there's questions to understand where it is they're trying to go, and then emotionally understand what they're afraid of losing and what their hope of gain is, and you attach your sale to those motivators.
Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. We'd love to do the breakout room via Zoom to practice. I wish we had 2 hours. We would have done it, but we just we didn't. We ran out of time. But it's something, again, like, there's a question here I think about, sort of like books that I saw coming in. I mean, the great thing about selling is that there's a ton. You don't learn it in your fancy schooling, but there's a lot of books. And
I'll give you 2 that I recommend, and they're, I don't want to say diametrically opposed, but one is a book called The Challenger Sale.
Go ahead.
The Sales Executive Council is the name of the company. I think it's Cassidy is the author. And another book is Integrity Selling, and they're 2 different models. One, the Challenger Sale, being a little bit more new school, Integrity Selling being a little bit more old school, and maybe somewhere in the middle you find something that resonates with you. Selling, there is a huge element of style to it, where, one thing I would say though is advice I got early in my career is you can never be too aggressive in sales. And it turns out that was really bad advice. You can absolutely be too aggressive in sales. I think you need to be, this word called, I use appropriately assertive a lot in working with sales teams. And maybe somewhere between those 2 processes, you find something that's appropriately assertive that resonates with you.
Yeah, one thing too, I mean, this book here is one that I recently read. It's called Sell More Faster. And Techstars sort of gives it out. Brad Feld, who was an early Techstars guy. But the thing why I wanted to bring this out is like, there's also like kind of industry specific or stage specific type of sales. It's not a one size fits all type of thing. And so a lot of the type of selling that I did, especially like Big Frame, the company I founded and started and eventually sold to DreamWorks, we were successful because we were the best at selling. And the reason we were the best at selling was because we found product market fit faster. Like we were able to take the thing that we thought was valuable and shape it into what people wanted to buy more quickly. And so, and then we built an infrastructure and a way of selling and scaled that sales team faster than, than people. And so all of a sudden our competitors or other people in the space were still fumbling around, and our phones were ringing, and our business was growing, and we were, hiring people. And so I think, be aware of that, when you're hiring sales managers, when you're designing a sales process, when you're just thinking about it, that you have to be appropriate for for where your company is in its life cycle and what sector you're selling into, and those kinds of things.
I'll speak to this next one. Some good recommended opening probes. It depends what you're selling. As a general rule, you need to keep your product or your service out of your opening probe. And I just use this analogy all the time. If you're talking about your product or your service, you're talking about yourself. And if you go to dinner parties and talk about yourself the whole time, you probably don't get invited to too many more dinner parties. It's just not interesting to people. And this is that 12 to 15 second period where they're trying to make a determination about you and where this conversation's going. And what's more interesting is to anticipate one of their priorities. So I always recommend an exercise where, who's the stakeholder? What could we anticipate their priorities would be in that role? What solutions can we provide in the way of products or services that would speak to those priorities? And look for a match. So I've got a really good solution to this. I think it's a high priority to them. Guess what my topic is going to be? It's one advantage you have in these conversations is you get to start the conversation. So choose the topic wisely. Choose a high priority for them that gets the conversation going in a direction that's good for you, i.e., you can solve that problem. And in terms of language, we use, it's right out of a journalism textbook, but empirical fact, third-party reference, request for opinion. And it's almost like talking about journalists. You picture like an Aaron Andrews following Coach Belichick into the locker room at halftime. It's, your defense gave up 176 rushing yards in the first half. That's an empirical fact. Until now, everybody thought your stout front seven was going to be the difference in this game. What adjustments do you need to make at halftime? They don't ask it that way some of the time. They ask it that way every time. And there's a reason. The first one, Bill Belichick has a lot of books on the shelf up in his brain. The first one is for the benefit of the listener. I know you got a lot of stuff in your brain. We're going to talk about rush defense. Okay, I got a book on that. Yep, we gave up a bunch. Here's what I need to go do. The third-party reference is one that can give you credibility. If I saw another endorsement for the Challenger sale here, they have a different way of doing it, but it's ultimately the same thing. And I use this a lot, where claim the challenge. Where if you're calling on whatever a VP of supply chain somewhere, say, having called on a lot of VPs of supply chain, what I hear over and over is challenges with X, Y, and Z in today's market. What do you see in here? So that 10 seconds into the conversation, this guy can be like, oh, great, you understand my job. You have experience working with people like me, and you came here to talk about things that are pertinent to me. You win credibility early in the conversation by predicting priorities, making a comment about them, and then asking for them to elaborate.
Good one. Okay.
Next one for you, Steve. Tech sales.
Buying centers of target companies change. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is the one thing that is this, right, is like everything is changing, and different industries work different, and different companies change, and a CEO comes in and all of a sudden processes are all different. And so this just it gets into the preparation, it gets into being data driven, it gets into making sure you're doing all the right activities. Like you need to know that's your job as a salesperson. If you're managing a sales team, they need to know. I mean, if you're the CEO and and you've told the sales guy, hey, I'm going to help you get this one over the line, and then he brings you in, and then you find out in the meeting that the decision maker is not in the room, and you gave up a day to go there. Like, that's a big problem, right? And so I think the 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 reason that you have people doing this and everything isn't just sold through websites and pull downs is to get this kind of information out. And so making statements, and even with something like the pandemic, things have changed, right? There might be more levels of sign off that you need to spend money than there were a quarter ago. And so that's why having the conversation, building the relationships is something that Phil talked about there.
Yeah, the next one.
More
Next one
about why
on.
Sales teams don't maintain their pipeline. What are the incentives against keeping things accurate and current? This is a good one for you, Phil.
Because they're not managed well, or sometimes they're left to their own devices. It's like, oh, the sales guys, they're a bunch of nuts over there. But they typically get it done. They need to be managed against metrics, just like every other part of the organization. And it's also why choosing your sales leadership wisely is such a critical function. Any reason why they don't, it's like, why does your dog misbehave? Like, somehow you've let it happen over time, that the habit is, the juices works as a squeeze. I'll misbehave. It's not like there's any punishment attached to it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really a performance management issue where I think, there have to be rewards for good behavior. And I think there have to be consequences for bad behavior. And as the leader, you set the example as to what's going to be culturally accepted in your sales team versus what's not.
Yeah. And then, the other thing too, right, in terms of, it's not always the sales team's fault when the numbers are going down, right? There might be a new competitor. There might be, a change in the economy, et cetera. And so this one's very specific, about the pipeline, but sometimes, the relationship that you have and the reason that you're managing the sales team is because you're getting access to real-time information from them. And this might be, well, you guys know what a SWOT analysis is, right? Like, a lot of your opportunities and threats are going to come from your sales team. And so you'll get, the reason that you study these things is to tell the difference between what we call sales noise, which is the dog ate my homework. That's why the numbers aren't down. And, the dog really did eat my homework, and so, we have to change our product. We have to hire more salespeople. We have to get them on planes. We have to do something different than we're doing because this is not working.
The next one on books, we gave you a couple, and quite frankly, we could add 50 more to it. I think of sales books and sales processes. It's almost like, at the beginning of the year, you make a resolution that this is the year I'm taking fitness seriously. And, in mid-January, I just can't decide whether to buy a treadmill or an elliptical. Like, pick one. What matters is that you execute it and stay disciplined to it, not so much which one you pick.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think you'll find ones that that you can, that resonate. And then also just, have the humility to know what you don't know, and, go home from work and read about, read 10 different opinions about how you qualify a lead, and then bring that into work with you. And it's always going to be changing. You're always going to need to be learning. I do like the sell more faster one, but really for this one, it's because it's about a stage of company that I really like, which is that early stage.
Steve, maybe you could speak to this next one. Can you speak more about the process of qualifying partner leads in a partnership role? Specifically, how you can help to ensure your partners are bringing you new business instead of competitors?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, I think. And business development can be really frustrating because a lot of times, it's, hey, go find, I made this content, figure out how I can distribute it, or something like that. And it's just like, you're not really sure it's even possible when you set out to do it. And so, um, the most important thing about qualifying is actually that you are doing it, um, and you're having a conversation that's constant about what a qualified customer looks like. That's what I would say. Um, the for the most part, it really kind of comes down to the types of partnerships you're looking to do. I mean, the first business development job that I did was a long time ago, and it was, we would bundle our software with PCs, and
Mm.
we would and and other hardware, and it was just like, well, you know how many units do they sell? Which is like Phil's sort of 2x2 that he showed you. Are they currently bundling a competitor? Do they bundle anything at all? Now I have a conversation with them. Like, are they open to this conversation about a bundle? Would they like to, or do they have religion against doing that for whatever reason? I did a deal with Apple to distribute software with the very first iPod. I mean, it wasn't an easy thing. Apple didn't like other software companies putting software. They ended up building iTunes to get rid of the problem of distributing other people's software. But that was, uh, that was an opportunity that we found, and that we were able to do the deal. And from a qualification standpoint, a lot of time went into, hey, will they really do this deal? And we ended up getting it done. And so I think that that in terms of really what you're trying to avoid is some of the problems that I showed you in that case, which is, hey, we got all these potential partners. There's a list of 30 people we're calling on. Like, everything's going well. You don't want to find out in 3 months that 25 of those never had a chance, and you spend an equal amount of time on those instead of quickly getting to the 5 that you could focus on. That's really the important part about qualification. And think about raising money from VC, right? It's just like, that process is kind of designed to efficiently be qualifying, right? Like, we're seed investors, we're growth stage investors. Okay, we're raising seed capital, so we have to go there. We invest in these sectors. Okay, I'm in the other sector. I'm not even going to bother sending you my deck because you're never going to invest. And so you spend a bunch of time. There are potentially 200 venture capitalists that are going to put money into companies this year. There's only 10 that really you have a chance with in your company. How quickly can you get to them? That's qualifying.
All right, the next one about telltale signs of a successful sales culture. I'll jump on that one quickly and just say, I've had a lot of accuracy, I guess, in working with the middle management in sales. Where really they are such a conduit where you've got salespeople out interfacing with your customers every day. And you've got sales leadership attached to company leadership that's trying to push directives down. Now, the company leadership isn't going to make very good decisions if they don't have good information coming from the street, and that gets funneled through that middle management, the regional sales manager kind of job. Directives that are coming from corporate have to get executed at the street level. All of that gets messaged through this middle management. And so to me, it's show me a strong field sales management team, a bunch of good regional managers that have a good pulse of the street, as well as organizational directives, and I'll show you a successful sales culture. Yeah, that's one that over and over, and we skipped through that STEPS acronym slide earlier to get to the case study, but the E is energy. And those are the people that are managing the people that are out representing your company every day. and they need to manage the energy of those people. Salespeople get kicked around a lot, and it's easy for them to go negative. And let's face it, nobody wants to buy from a negative salesperson. Nothing sells like confidence and conviction and positivity. And that's the regional sales manager's job, to keep the collective energy of the team that's out in front of your customers every day at a high level. That to me is the most telltale.
Yeah, I like that, Phil. I mean, let's see. There's only, I guess, one was a book,
Yeah,
Chris,
one
but
more.
there's only one more. I mean, I'll just jump into sales culture. I mean, a lot of mistakes in terms of sales culture, especially in the early stages, are not really being realistic about what motivates salespeople. They typically tend to be motivated by by success, and they want to be put in position where they can succeed. And so you'll spend a lot of time in your career on like compensation um, plans for sales teams, and making sure that you get that right. And I got some especially if you're starting a company, right? Like that first sales leader might be the most important hire that you make. It might be the difference between success and failure. And so
Totally.
yeah, like you don't want to lose out on the best person that you can get for the sake of like $25,000 in bonus that they needed, and you can't get them over the line. And so sometimes you've got to be willing to really kind of go out and get the right person and compensate them more than than you think. So this last question, I mean, it's a really good one to end on, I guess, which is it's the sales process in a startup company when the product isn't fully fleshed out, and being held revenue targets to deliver. Yeah, product market fit is like is an obsession of early stage people, and uh, and getting sales right. I have a really good friend who's a CEO, and last year he had literally had a panic attack in his shower. He's a 35-year-old guy, and his wife had to like take him to the hospital because he was having to go on every sale. He had to be in the room to close a deal, and you're under an amazing amount of pressure, and and you've got sales, and they're happening, but like they're really only happening if the CEO is pounding on the table and promising product changes. It's just an impossible place to be in, and this is the situation that we put ourselves in if we work at early stage companies. And so the one thing I'd say is like building out a big sales team before you have a product that is solving somebody's problem to the extent that they're willing to pay for it is a classic mistake. So we want to get to revenue early, but we don't want to create unrealistic expectations before we really are ready. And so that's an entire that's a career. Nobody knows the answer to that. It's just really hard work, making sure your product and marketing teams are on board with how important it is to support sales. I guess it's time.
Bedtime at our house.
Yeah. With that, guys, we're going to let everybody go. Thanks. It was a bummer not to be able to sort of be there in the classroom in person.
Yeah, it was. I wish we would have had a chance to meet you all in person, but we thank you for hanging in there through tonight's talk. I think you have our contact information by way of Dorina. If there's any way we can help any of you offline, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Good night.
Go Bruins.